Very well welcome to our amazing guest, Rabih Khoury.
Crypto is the future, and I'm in VC, so I have to be positive, right? The glass is always half full, not half empty, or else we'll not invest in anything. If I don't believe in a good future, how would you invest in anything in VC?
Shall we have soon service providers, crypto service providers in the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia? Because I think this is something where we speak about a big nation, a powerful nation, a young one, nation as well.
70% of Saudis are below the age of 30.
And a lot of appetite for technology, gaming, crypto assets. I think this is something very interesting, perhaps for the whole region.
As an entrepreneur, you have to swallow your ego. This is difficult. We're talking now people, not science. To be an entrepreneur is a very difficult job. And people who have that character are very stubborn, take risks that other more established, more mature economies are not willing to take. Okay? Think of Dubai as sort of also a venture city that started, in 1990. Today, my expectations of the accuracy of a doctor are much higher. I don't want to see a doctor at 5 p.m. when he's tired and he makes mistakes. Doctors today don't have an excuse to make systematic mistakes anymore.
Welcome back, everyone, to the next episode. Today, we have a very special and amazing guest. We have a pioneer in the venture capital space in the MENA region. We have a person who did one of the first investments into crypto companies in the region. We also had a very phenomenal discussion about AI, all the benefits, all the upside, but also the dangers and the consequence that we will have on our society, and also amazing discussions about the capital markets in the region. Very well welcome to our amazing guest, Rabih Khoury, and a big pleasure also to have with me my host, Demetrios Zamboglou. So welcome everyone to the show, and let's have an amazing discussion.
Welcome to our podcast today, and thank you, Anton, for the introduction.
Pleasure.
Maybe let's start today with you telling us of this journey and how do you come across to these tech companies and what makes you invest in them, because I'm sure that everybody wants to know, because today we have a guy that is behind the scenes from the VC side. And let's get all his insights.
Thank you, Dimitri.
Yeah.
Thank you, Anton.
Yeah.
It's a pleasure to be here. So I started actually my journey as an engineer, first in Lebanon. I'm Lebanese. And then I went to California, studied at Berkeley, and I focused on something called computational mechanics, which is a very complicated field. You learn too much about almost nothing, so very narrow field. I worked in Silicon Valley as an engineer after working on a big project for the Department of Defense. And then I got a bit bored in 1995, applied for business school, and then got into Columbia Business School. So I moved from San Francisco to New York, which was a great experience to get the feeling of both coasts of the US, very different. And then I worked in New York as an M&A banker covering the TMT sector. Telecom, media, and technology. Back then, technology was a bit smaller than telecom. This was very interesting. Obviously, the US is a great country and really enjoyed my work. And in 2005, I had some family commitments. I'm Lebanese and my parents are getting old. So decided to move back to the region. Dubai was not the plan, but ended up in Dubai by serendipity, and we've been living here ever since. When I moved to Dubai, I headed the private equity practice of one of the investment arms, the financial investment arms of Dubai Holding, the Sheikh's Sheikh Mohammed's private company. I was CEO of emerging markets at a company called Dubai International Capital. And
so how do you get that job? How do you find this CEO of emerging markets, like coming from America, New York, and how does it work?
I had a friend who was with Morgan Stanley. She had moved to Dubai, 3 months before I did, and she met one of the executives at Dubai Holding, and they were looking for a person who had private equity experience and spoke Arabic.
Okay,
which is a bit unique back then. So, and again, it's if I do an interview for a new position, and they asked me how my career progressed. It has been almost all by chance. Not very planned.
Like usual, best things happen by coincidence.
So I mean, we ended up in Dubai just by I had been to the UAE once before. I didn't know the country.
Yes. How was Dubai, UAE in 2000 when you
2005?
2005 when you arrived.
I mean, different. Obviously, coming from New York, any city in the world will look a bit provincial, right?
Yes.
I mean, even Paris, London. When you come from New York, it's nothing. But Dubai is just the right size. First, it's also quite international, which is important, and it keeps us close to our Arabic roots.
Yes.
And it was just growing, and I think I grew as a person with Dubai. I mean, the joke about Dubai is that every 2 weeks it would change. I mean, Dubai changes all the time.
Yes.
So we've been very blessed and very lucky to be in Dubai, and I had my kids here, and we're very, very happy. So after private equity, so in 2009 we had the financial crisis. Yeah. Which technically started in Dubai when Nakheel said they might default on their bonds, if you remember. It was I had to leave Dubai Holding, but stayed in Dubai and kept on doing advisory and merchant banking. During my stay with Dubai Holding, we created something called the Arab Business Angels Network. It was one of the first angel networks in the whole region. Nobody understood what the angel was when we translate angel to Arabic.
Maybe explain a little bit. Yes. I'm sure that a lot of people will not understand what
angel investing is basically, if you look at when you invest in technology or in entrepreneurship, first you get money from your parents,
yes,
and then from your friends, and then hopefully you'll find somebody who is much more very experienced in the sector that you're working on, and he will give you money, but he will give you also a lot of wisdom. Okay, and we call this an angel. He becomes your angel if you want. Yes. Okay, so he's a person. So in the Middle East, in our sector, there's a person called Fadi Ghandour. I don't know if you know him. He was the founder of Aramex. Okay, Fadi has done about 70 angel investments. In our ecosystem, we call Fadi a super angel, and he's a dear friend, Fadi. So we wanted to bring in this expertise to help entrepreneurship, and we created the Arab Business Angels Network in 2006. And I hired Walid Hanna, who is currently, the founder and CEO of Middle East Venture Partners, the firm I work for. I hired him to grow the Arab Business Angels Network. Okay. And we did a pan-regional Arab business plan competition, got 2,000 business plans, and invested in 2 companies. It was very interesting, with a TV show. But not a la Trump, right? This was a nurturing TV show, right? We're not hiring and firing people. Yes. Just nurturing them to understand that they can, with correct money, they can actually build their dreams.
I'm sure if you did The Apprentice in the UAE, I think it will work. It will be a little bit tougher.
There was a version that started in the UAE.
Okay.
But it ended up not continuing. But what we were doing was not The Apprentice. Yeah. It was just to help people present correctly, do an elevator pitch, do a small financial model, just get them into the idea that you can be an entrepreneur, and not necessarily in technology, Dimitri, right? It was just any kind of entrepreneur.
Of course.
So in 2009, I left Dubai Holding, but stayed in Dubai, and I was working on a lot of interesting advisory mandates and investment mandates. And Walid Hanna came to me in 2010 and told me, I want to start Middle East Venture Partners, and I want you to be my chairman, because I was a bit older than him and I wear a tie. Okay, that's the only reason.
Maybe
that's the qualification.
Maybe Anton, a remark. Maybe we should start wearing ties.
I would appreciate, some.
Let's think about it.
So in the Middle East, I call it the power of the tie.
Yes,
it has some weight.
That's true.
And so we started Middle East Venture Partners in 2010, and then launched our first fund, a proper GP/LP structure, American style, in 2010. It was a small fund, $10 million. And the company grew. Today we manage around $300 million, and we're investing out of our 4th fund. Awesome. So this is sort of the background. In terms of what we've done in crypto, I've been personally quite interested in crypto just because I'm an engineer. Between myself and my kids, we have 3 gaming rigs at home that we built with some interesting NVIDIA GPUs. Yes. And so obviously there's a lot of interest. I mean, you cannot escape what's happening in crypto, and it's a very, very fascinating sector.
My question before was, how do you find these companies that you want to invest?
So
do they find you?
Yes.
Or do you find them?
So today they mostly find us.
They mostly find.
We are one of the most known brand name.
Of course.
Okay.
That's why we have you here with us.
Now, but you cannot be complacent in what we do, because people remember you always based on your last win.
For sure.
Okay. So about 80% of the deal flow that we see comes organically. They contact us, they come and see us at conferences, they send us emails, WhatsApps, you know. But 20% is still, we have to fight for it and find it, okay? Now, it's very important to understand in venture capital, because there's a very interesting, you know, intellectual oxymoron in the argument of venture capital. You know who Reid Hoffman is?
Yep.
PayPal and co-founder of LinkedIn.
Yes.
He said something very simple. He said, a successful entrepreneur is an entrepreneur who is contrarian and successful. So you have to start with something, he has to be contrarian, right? See something other people are not willing to see. And if he fails, nobody will remember him, right? But if he successfully becomes a Bill Gates or a Mark Zuckerberg or, you know, right?
Correct.
So we make money on outliers.
Yes.
By definition, outliers, we cannot recognize them based on our experience. It's, you see, you understand? Because if he's an outlier, I cannot, in VC, you know what we call experience? Wisdom we always get too late. Okay? So this is the key. The key is to try to recognize the outliers. Okay? This is very important. Now, the other thing that's important in VC is that you need to make sure that the entrepreneur comes to you. He has to have confidence in your knowledge and be able to help him grow the company and help him finance his future rounds. Financing is like the blood of these companies, okay? So we are big enough, we have co-investors, we have international investors, and we are able to always, you know, not always, but in the majority, bring funding for the successful, you know, follow-on rounding, which is very, very important. The other thing that people forget is that typically in our funds, we typically invest in like 10 to 15 companies. So it's a portfolio. So when I sit with individual investors who do direct deals by themselves, they ask me, which one in your portfolio is a winner? Okay, when we invest in them, we think they're all winners, honestly. Okay.
For sure.
However, we deliver for our investors a return on a portfolio, not on, I don't know which one is going to be the super winner and which one, you know, but I believe a well-built portfolio will deliver the correct risk-adjusted return for our investors. And that's why when you start doing VC, and this is very specific in VC, because in VC typically there's no tangible value. If you have a problem with the entrepreneur, the investment is gone. You have not bought anything, neither a patent nor a factory nor anything, nor inventory, okay? So it's important to have a portfolio. We're going to lose part of it, okay? But we at MEVP can give a return on a portfolio. And this is the difference between a professional investor and an amateur investor. And I'm not saying amateur in a bad way. Amateur, you're Greek. It comes from the word, no, to love. Is do something for love. A professional does something for money, okay? That's the difference between what we do and what individuals do. And in VC, specifically, it's dangerous to do single deals. The risk is too high.
Very dangerous. There is a saying that do not put all your eggs in one basket.
Yes. Yeah. But people look, these are heuristics. People believe they know more.
Yes.
And you know in VC where they make big mistakes, when they are in a sector and they see a digital disruptor and they think they know more than the digital disruptor because they know their sector. This is when knowledge makes them dangerous. They take too much risk. You know, again, portfolio, 15 companies, we nurture all of them, and hopefully we'll have more winners than losers. And we try to return, you know, typically 2.5x on the invested capital in the fund.
What is the time horizon for?
So our funds are typically 9 years, 4.5 years investment period, a year and a half follow-on period. I'll explain what it is. And 3 years, 4 years divestment period. So this is a long-term, illiquid investment product. 4.5 years, we try to invest slowly. The reason is themes will change in VC, and you want to give your investor enough options across the first 4.5 years. Because we can invest, Dimitri, everything in the year 1.
Okay.
But then if you have a new crypto that comes up in year 5, you don't do it. So the idea is to give enough exposure to investors over 4.5 years. And then we keep 20% of the fund to continue investing in the existing companies. That's called follow-on. We don't do new investments because you cannot, it's difficult to time when a company needs money. So we keep a reserve to keep our companies going. And then after year 6, we're trying to exit. And I have a very interesting title. I'm the only chief exit officer in the Arab world. It's interesting. It's a very difficult job. It has been a very lonely job because exits are very difficult.
Exits are
But
very difficult.
Anton, is very simple. It's easy to buy, difficult to sell. Okay, in everything, right?
Yes. I come from market making where we know how
Yes.
valuable liquidity is.
Yes.
And access to liquidity. And it was something very interesting that you said that you built the first angel network in
Yes.
this region. So can you tell us a bit more, what is the typical profile of an angel investor or super investor? What do they look like? What's the ticket size? Like, how does this work from your experience?
So angel investing is an investment of around $200,000 maximum. Okay? And it's mostly to bring in somebody who will help you, whose knowledge, whose connections, whose network is more valuable than his money. Okay? And he's called an angel because typically they save the company and prepare it for a professional investment from a firm like us. Okay? These are people who are successful, who've made money, and who want to have fun. They're not trying to make money on this venture. Okay? It's like growing kids. They enjoy the early stage, they enjoy interaction with the young founders, they enjoy the energy. Okay? So, and by the way, angel investing was invented in the US. It's quite mature there. We started doing it formally in 2005. And this was the first formal angel investing platform in the region.
And how do you find angel investors? You mentioned that they have specific
It's networking. They come to us, we know them, we see them at the events. Yes. The VC industry is a very small industry in the Middle East. We all know each other. Yes. In addition, this is also very important, we tend to do club deals. Okay, it's not like private equity. Private equity, typically there's somebody trying to take control. Okay. Typically in VC, you're taking a minority stake. You know why? We invest with people who own their businesses. We want them to still own their businesses. If you take control, he becomes an employee, or he or she becomes an employee. And this dynamic we avoid. So the idea is to take 15 to 25% stake, get a board seat, we get a lot of protective rights, negative covenants, veto rights, reserved matters, etc., but not interfere. The business is still owned by the entrepreneur. So through that, network, we tend to lead our transaction, but we'll have 3-4 VCs who will invest with us in a club deal. Okay, and we see because an angel could be a successful entrepreneur who exited. For sure. An industry expert who sold his company and wants to enjoy life and give back to the community. People are willing to invest time. You'll be surprised how much people are willing to invest time.
But I like what Anton has asked. Is like, if let's say I have a company who specializes in digital assets, and I want to find out who is this top 10 angel investors, where can I find them? There is no such list on the website. There's no such list in one of the leading magazines. So how do I reach and find these people?
That's very true, Dimitri. And because the crypto industry is a bit young, okay? But today, if you look at, for example, some of the early investors in Coinbase, that exited in the IPO,
correct?
Okay, they made money,
of course,
and they probably
made
today
really good money,
yes,
I think,
and probably today they want to give back. Okay.
But I'm talking particularly the Middle East, for example.
I know, but I mean, in RAIN, Coinbase is an investor with us. The nice thing about crypto, it's a totally global sector. I don't care where you are. It's the same. You see what I'm saying? In VC, some of what we do needs, for example, to be localized, Arabized. In crypto, you don't need neither to localize nor to Arabize.
Correct. Yes.
So a successful guy in the US, he will know what's happening in Dubai, in Abu Dhabi, in Saudi Arabia. It's very easy. And the other thing is, as an entrepreneur, you have to swallow your ego, and this is difficult. We're talking now people, not science. To be an entrepreneur is a very difficult job, and people who have that character are very stubborn. Because they're going into something where the odds are very low. The odds of success. So this is where it's interesting. You have somebody who's very stubborn, but who's willing to ask for help. It's not easy.
No, I mean, in this entrepreneur game, I'm sure Anton has a lot of stories
Demetrios,
to
as
say
well.
as well.
We also had together a startup, so...
We were also entrepreneurs.
Yes.
I mean, not as successful as RAIN.
It's okay, but
hats off to
it's
RAIN and the guys from RAIN.
It's a lonely, difficult job, right?
But again, we're trying to close the gaps as well to know how to find these peoples. And if someone were to send an email in your company and saying that, guys, we need help, do you think someone will reply from your group to this person?
Not me. I'm very bad at answering emails. If you WhatsApp me, I'll answer.
No.
Look, we try. At the end of the day, Dimitri, we are today late stage investors.
No.
So we do the A's and the B's. If we don't nurture the early stage, we're not going to have product for us to invest in.
For sure.
So we always think about the whole ecosystem. Okay, it's not like you wake up in the morning and you have Series A candidates. If an angel didn't nurture them, if somebody didn't do the pre-seed or the seed, they will never grow and become attractive investments for us.
I always say this to Anton, the beauty of the UAE and the Middle East, if you ask for help and you are sincere, help will come. And it's one of the few regions that I've been and I live to that I've seen this happen over and over again. And I think it's a really good place to do a startup here.
Yes. Also because it's small and the density of capital is high, you tend to see a lot of people quickly. If you're in the US,
Yes.
huge, 3 time zones, 350 million people, it's difficult. Here, it's a bit closer, so it's very important.
Rabih, when you mentioned that you're a bit later stage
Yes.
fund, can you tell us or explain to us how does a very attractive Series A candidate startup look like for you? What kind of metrics do they need to hit?
Yes.
What do you expect for them? And maybe how do you judge their trajectory going forward? Like how do you make this analysis and say, let's give it a go and let's invest into this company?
Okay. So a Series A company typically has achieved what we call product market fit. That means their product they were able to sell their product to a serious customer who paid a commercial price for it. That means the client cannot be the father or the uncle or the brother, right? Okay. So once they reach product market fit and they start generating what we call real revenues, we look at them when they have around $1 to $3 million of net revenues. Okay? This is when they become candidates for us. Now, if you look at the journey in venture, as risk drops, valuation goes up, right?
For sure.
Okay? Because you need to try to keep your risk-adjusted ratio constant across the journey, okay?
Markowitz.
Yeah. Well, that's the efficient frontier is a bit different, but I understand. I mean, it's the same,
Very similar.
So we are willing to pay a higher valuation for a de-risked company. In addition, we believe that when an entrepreneur reaches product market fit, he's mature enough to benefit from our ecosystem. If he's too young and he wants too much hand-holding, we're probably not the right firm for him. He probably should find an angel, go into a venture studio. There are a lot of right people to advise and to invest in the journey from an idea to hopefully an IPO. Okay, we're sort of the late stage guys.
Yes. Rabih, can I ask you? I'm a venture partner at Full Stack Ventures, and I always remember the story for Paul Graham, who says that it's like peeling an onion. You're de-risking the situation for the investor. And I always reflect about demonstrating that to the investor in a sense of proactive, constant communication, showing that we are peeling the onion, de-risking. And then many times I see the communication from prospective startups who reach out to me once. They say, Anton, we're a great startup, amazing idea. And then if I don't reply timely or it's not the right moment, I never hear from them again. So what would you advise startups? How can they build this relationship with an investor, maybe who initially still sees the full onion, but how do you peel the onion, as Paul Graham says, such that the investor says, okay, let me bite the onion. Let me take the, from your experience,
First, it's not easy, okay? Also, you mentioned, so they send you a business plan.
Yeah, one time. Yeah.
And so also, young entrepreneurs sometimes are not very confident. So when they don't hear from you, they think that their business is bad, okay? But it's not correct. I'll give you an example. I do not like to judge very early stage business plans. The reason is I come across as if I know something. And in the early stage, nobody knows. So I'm afraid to put somebody, Dimitri, on the wrong track just because I'm wearing a tie. Even though at that level, I don't know much more than he does.
Makes sense. Yes.
Okay? So I'm very careful to give advice more on the mature side. Because on the very early, I can only give platitudes. Focus, get a partner, watch your capital, try to dominate a narrow vertical and then expand. I mean, these are platitudes. Everybody who's so there's nothing new there. I mean, a YouTube video, 101 VCs, you'll get the list better than my list. Yeah. Okay, but once they become bigger businesses, then I believe we can have a more impactful conversation and help them, because then you can help with talent, with money, with market entry, with new partners, with exits, with a lot of things. One other thing we like in venture teams is teams that are two founders.
Yes.
Okay.
I've heard this before,
yes.
And I've experienced this before. When it's too many cooks in the kitchen,
or one cook also.
One cook is dangerous.
It's dangerous.
And too many is dangerous. So two for us is good, and this is very simple. This is basically the Steve Jobs and Steve Wozniak.
Yes.
The introvert technologist and the extrovert who can market. Who can bullshit a bit, who can fake it and then he makes it. No, it's important. It's part of the game. You have to think big. The problem in this business, you have to think big. Okay? So we like teams that are more than one entrepreneur. Okay? And we've been more successful. And if you have a problem with one, you can buy out the other and still, because these companies go through a lot of very difficult, journey. People only see the beauty about the journey when you IPO, when you make money. And people forget how many other ventures didn't make it. It's called the survival bias, right? People forget that this is a very, very difficult business. And by the way, the difference between a fund manager and an entrepreneur is what? I can assess risk more than the entrepreneur. Because I'm betting on a portfolio, he's betting on one company.
Yes, for sure.
So he's willing to take much more risk than I'm willing to take. And it's a human nature. He's good at what he's doing. I'm trying to do what I'm doing. Okay. And just to joke a bit, you know what you call a lazy entrepreneur? A VC.
Fair.
Maybe you can. I mean, I'm sure everybody's interested to hear about this story. Tell us about the Rain story.
Okay.
How did it begin? Did you find them? Did they find you? What made the successful team? Because this is one of the stories. Of course, we'll bring Rain as well here, but it's good to hear it from a different side.
Okay. So they actually, we found them, but there's a story behind it. It wasn't. So when we raised our third fund in 2018, we responded to an RFP by the government of Bahrain. The government of Bahrain has a big telco called Batelco. Okay, they did an RFP that we won, and then the government told them don't fund VC. They wanted to build a corporate VC, so we won the mandate for the regional VC. Then the government of Bahrain told Batelco don't fund on your own. Let's create a platform funded by multiple government entities.
Like a syndicate.
A syndicate, but it was a fund of fund platform. Okay, but by the government. Okay, so we ended up having to respond to another RFP after we won the first RFP. So Bahrain created in 2018 something called Al-Waha Fund of Fund. And I think it was around $100 million, if I'm not mistaken. And we were one of the first funds to receive, a commitment from the fund.
Sorry, and it was fund of funds. Only the funds were venture capital funds, or also different strategies?
No. Yes, only venture capital fund. He's a colleague and a very important part of our team. And then, because we were there, Rain had. You know why it's called Rain?
No, I think it's from Bahrain.
Yes, it's the other part of Bahrain. Exactly. Yeah. It's the second part of Bahrain.
I think it's
so.
from Bahrain.
AJ and Joseph recognized that they wanted to expand outside the US. The US is a bit too crowded, and they decided that it might be good to get to be regulated by a central bank, which was the first in the region. And one of the most dynamic central banks in the region is the Bahraini Central Bank. It's a small country. They want to attract stuff. They can do things. They can do things a bit more avant-garde, if you want. So they got into the Al-Waha sort of incubator in Bahrain, got our attention because we received money from the fund of fund, and also were applying to get their license from the central bank. Now, I don't remember the timing, but I think when we invested, they had already had their pre-approval from the Bahraini Central Bank.
So they were activating the license.
Yes. But it was a unique license because none of the central banks were giving licenses for a crypto exchange.
Of course.
You know, Saudi Arabia was not doing it, UAE was not doing it, Kuwait was not doing it.
On the previous episode, we had Talal, who is the CEO and founder of MENA. He was also explaining the proactive and the visionary move by the Central Bank of Bahrain.
Yes.
And granting him, obviously a lot later than Rain, granting him as well a license to operate. And later on, obviously, VARA and the authorities in
And I
UAE.
think the Bahraini Central Bank also gave Binance a license also. I remember CZ did a big announcement. But Rain was the first one.
Yes.
Okay, now, it was good validation. It was important. But
And did they present a business plan to you? What were the dynamics? You had a meeting with them?
No, we knew that we had to do something in crypto. Okay. I mean, we worked at one point at MEVP to actually we did a white paper for our own coin.
Okay.
But we ended up not issuing it. The coins became a bit radioactive.
Yes.
Okay. So, look, we're in technology. We hear about this stuff, right? And we want to do something. However, we could not invest directly in a crypto asset.
Yes.
Because it's not our mandate. We have to invest in operating companies. I mean, we're taking management fees, we're taking carry. If you want to invest in crypto, they can invest without our advice. And I don't think we know much about, crypto. But we know how to grow companies at the end of the day. And, Rain was a technology company that's, focused on becoming a digital crypto exchange. It had to be regulated because we also are regulated. Okay, we cannot get close to unregulated people who are taking money and doing asset management. Impossible. Yes. Okay. Also, the Bahrain Central Bank was very, very strict with them. Initially, they could only trade like 4 coins. And slowly, as they proved themselves, they let them add other coins. So today, if you want to do Doge coins, etc., you will not find them on Rain. They don't have the whole, okay. The central bank keeps a very, very tight, control on Rain. I think Rain today has, I don't know, maybe 20, 30, possible crypto securities. My kids keep on finding these weird securities, and we don't find them on Rain. That's when I know they're weird, right?
They don't pass the central bank test.
Exactly.
Yes.
But again, I mean, to have a central banker, which is such an innovator, of course, there should be some limits.
Yes.
Otherwise, how you can adjust the risk, especially for the retail clients.
Exactly. But this also for us, even though it was still a small company, having been regulated, made it a mature business. So for us, even though it was still a small company, not generating a lot of revenues, it was a later stage business. To get approved by a central bank takes a lot of work.
Rabih, I have to say I'm really inspired and impressed when you say how early on you started looking at companies that deal with crypto assets and cryptocurrencies, because I do remember during my days in Switzerland when I was building companies, many times investors would say, Anton, this is a career risk for us to get involved in such an early stage young industry, which I understood. It's fine. But I also feel that there is something inside of you, inside of your spirit and inside of the spirit of your fund, where you are very early on looking at new technologies.
In 2018, it was also crypto winter.
It was brutal, huh?
It was brutal.
But this is what I was trying to tell you at the beginning. We are going to make money on outliers, okay? And in VC, we have to take risks. The business is about taking correct risk. If there's no risk in VC, we'll never make a return. So Rain was actually not, for us, not such a dangerous investment. We've done investment that looked much less mature than Rain. Rain, the team was, they knew what they were doing, etc. And the validation of getting the central bank license was very important for us.
Yes. Rabih, you also have to go to Europe and to Switzerland and teach these VCs there a bit more how to assess risk, because I can say this is
Anton, it's also necessity creates opportunity. Yeah. Okay, I think in Dubai, in the UAE, in Saudi Arabia, we have this change where we want to move forward. So we're willing to catch up if you want, take risks that other more established, more mature economies are not willing to take. Okay, think of Dubai as sort of also a venture city that started in 1990. Okay, and the vision of actually saying I'm not going to bring in local sponsors. I'm going to create cities that becomes the sponsor, like Media City, like Internet City, was also visionary, right? I mean,
there is this book that I know I've heard of, didn't read it yet, about the ruler of Dubai, how his entrepreneurial vision of running a city makes him as a CEO
Yes.
of a city. And I think this is something that I, moving from Switzerland to Dubai, really feel this entrepreneurial vibe, entrepreneurial spirit on all levels actually of the society, which is very inspiring.
It's inspiring, but also, I mean, this is one of the few cities where I think the public sector is ahead of the private sector.
Yes.
The public sector leads the private sector. Next week, there is an event that happens in Dubai called the Government Summit, okay, which is a very unique event in Dubai.
We heard about this, I think.
Talal mentioned
Yes. Yes, and it's because other countries come and try to learn from Dubai how to improve, how to move, as, think of it as political science, if you want, political tech, if you want, okay? Now, this doesn't apply to every country. Obviously, Dubai, there's a size issue, right? But if you see the changes that have happened in Saudi Arabia also,
yes,
in the last, let's say, starting in maybe 2018, 2019, the change has been dramatic. I've never seen such a large country advance so quickly, So, we can do things here a bit faster. Also because you don't have a lot of legacy inertia, it's easier. You see, it's easier, right?
Demetrios, something that we discuss very often is, shall we have soon service providers, crypto service providers in the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia? Because I think this is something where you speak about a big nation, a powerful nation, a young one, nation as well.
70% of Saudis are below the age of 30.
And a lot of appetite for technology, gaming, crypto assets. I think this is something very interesting, perhaps for the whole region, where we might have a competition as well with UAE or Bahrain.
Competition is good.
Some companies are being funded in the US that creates
because he wants to be close to the regulator. The Saudis have not yet given licenses in crypto. They're working on something early in the sandbox, but Rain wanted to be also very close to the regulators to be able to hopefully get a license, one of the first companies to get a license. Today, the Saudis trade through Rain, but they don't trade directly through Saudi Arabia. This business should be more regulated. And I think the regulator in Saudi will do something soon.
I think the GCC has a lot of potential, especially on digital assets. But you can see this not just on digital assets. You can see that it's probably one of the few countries that you take your Emirates ID, you put it in the system, and it does many, many things. It checks your health, it checks your employment status, it checks many, many things. I mean, even today when they brought my post, I had to use my Emirates ID to validate who I am. I think this digitization will not just stop, it will just evolve. And this is what we want to see in the next coming years. Also, what is your take on AI? Because AI is a very, very big word nowadays in the region.
Okay. So the first time I read about AI was science fiction, because I'm a big science fiction fan. I read a lot of science fiction. But the first time I saw AI in terms of something a bit more professional was in 1988 when I was studying at Berkeley. Back then we didn't call it AI. I mean, the AI algorithm and neural nets, the self-learning was theoretically, people understood it theoretically, but there was no compute power to do it.
Yes.
Right? There was nothing on the cloud yet, etc. So we tried to, I worked on something very early on, but very briefly at Berkeley. There was a project called Building Expert Systems. And the idea was to take the knowledge of an expert and to rationalize it into a code. Okay? And this was some of the first applications of AI. And today, I cannot tell you anything about AI because the leading companies in AI are so advanced and they're not telling us how advanced they are.
Yes.
I mean, in 2024, you know how big the budget of the Pentagon is in the US?
No.
$800 billion.
Wow.
This is a standalone budget, right? If there's a war, there's more appropriation. Just to keep things running, $800 billion.
In 1 year?
In 1 year, $800 billion. You know how much was spent in 2024 on AI investments in the US?
No.
$200 billion.
Wow.
Okay, so obviously they've done a lot of things. Okay, I think OpenAI about a year ago, they came out with this press release said we reached peak data. You know what's peak data?
Almost all the data.
They downloaded, they used all the data on the internet to train their AI
Yeah.
a year ago.
Yeah.
You know how many websites there is on the internet? 250 billion. So a year ago, they downloaded everything. Today, the big AI companies, so Anthropic, Google, it's called DeepMind, right?
Yeah.
ChatGPT, etc. There's a new class of companies that are being funded in the US that create synthetic data for AI learning because we ran out of data. Okay, so if they've invested just 1 year $200 billion and we ran out of data, they've already figured out a lot of things that they're not sharing with the public because AI is going to disrupt societies.
I believe also in this. I mean, me and Anton, we were at an event last week, and I cannot talk a lot about this event, of course.
I know, I understand.
But there was a lot of talk about AI. And I also believe that humans will not be able to put the rules for AI because the AI will be so advanced that they will be putting the rules to humans. So I think the tables will turn one way or another. One day it will happen.
So we need to stop that because science fiction shows you how bad, the Matrix, some of the movies, etc. Now, the problem though is it's such an arm race.
Yes.
Nobody trusts the other side. So China does not trust the US, US does not trust Europe. So we need to reach, when things stabilize and we never had a nuclear war.
We need to reach a consensus.
Yes,
Anton.
exactly. No, we reach something called mutual assured destruction, right? Yes. The MAD syndrome, right?
No, it's, in the blockchain world, the word consensus plays a very big
fine. So today,
role.
There are rules. So one of the famous science fiction writers that I like a lot is a guy called Isaac Asimov.
Yes.
Okay, famous. He wrote in the 50s the 3 laws of robotics. They're very simple rules. You can, and then one of them was modified. So now they're called the 4 rules of robotics. Okay. So there are some very basic rules, very simple rules that does not create the matrix. Okay. But you want everybody to play that game. So if the US does not trust China and China does not trust the US, none of them would apply those rules.
I think this is the first rule of game theory.
The prisoner's dilemma, how do they call it?
No. In the first rule, they say that if you want to play a game, all agents needs to be rational.
Yes, and have know all the information, or else they will not act rationally. Exactly. So this is the issue today. AI is such a, before you wanted more nuclear warheads. Today you want the best AI in the world. And every country wants to have that best, and they will, the trust is not there to say, I'm going to use certain laws, I'm going to throttle, but you're going to cheat or you're not going to cheat. Yes. We have to resolve this. I don't know how to resolve it. However, I think AI at the end of the day is going to improve humanity. Because look, we know about AI, about the LLMs, right? Things that talk to us. But there's a lot of other AI that has improved, medicine discovery, material science, and these are not LLMs, right? We can do experiments, etc., much, much faster. So humanity is going to benefit, but we need to stop the arms race.
Have you looked at companies that do AI? Have you invested in companies that their core is AI?
We have not yet invested in a pure AI company. The reason is there isn't much early stage AI in the region. Okay, and let me give you an analogy.
That's a very good opportunity, guys.
It is, and we'll discuss it, but it's still early. Today, the 2 countries that are being the most funded for AI are the US and China.
Yes.
Okay? And they're way ahead of us. You remember when
I'm not sure if they're way ahead of us because Rabih, a couple of weeks ago, there was something called
DeepSeek. But DeepSeek is
and it upset everyone, even the markets.
Yes. DeepSeek was a publicity stunt. And I'll discuss DeepSeek. Okay? It's not as the market was going crazy valuation-wise. On any news, they will drop. I mean, that day we had a $1 trillion drop in valuation.
Yes, for sure.
And then it came back a bit up. Okay, we'll talk about DeepSeek. But before we get to DeepSeek, if you remember when Google came out with when they won the search, war, if you want. You remember Alta Vista,
Yes, Yahoo.
Bing, Yahoo, etc. Right? Okay, and Google won. Right? They had a better
Netscape.
technology. Yes, Netscape, exactly. Okay. I remember when we were investing, and this was, I think, out of our first fund. Everybody was saying we're going to create our own search engine in the Middle East. Did it ever happen? No. We still use Google. Okay. Today, AI in the US is so advanced. We would not be doing things correctly if we say we're going to ignore and not use what's in the US and build our own. They're so way advanced that we're going to lose completely. I mean, today I want to use ChatGPT or Copilot or Gemini Pro to improve my business, right? To improve my life, to improve my investments here. I'm not going to ignore it to build my own. Now, other people will do. I mean, I think Adia is working on something. There's an Arabic LLM called Falcon that, by the way, trained partly on some of the data from one of our companies in Arabic. They want to do an Arabic LLM, okay? What's going to change the equation, in my opinion, is data sovereignty, okay? Today, incrementally, because already our data has been used, all the data in the world has been already used to train the current models. But today in Saudi Arabia and the UAE and Kuwait, so they're saying the data has to stay in country. So the incremental data becomes a bit variable for a very specific AI that's applicable locally in Dubai, in Abu Dhabi, in Saudi Arabia, in Kuwait. And this is the battle for us, okay? However, we have not seen yet in the Middle East a pure play deep tech AI company that we liked.
Rabih, can you explain from a venture capital perspective? It's something that Demetrios and I have noticed. You hear about this $100 million seed rounds, $200 million seed rounds. From your experience and expertise,
Not in the Middle East,
but in US, can you, from your experience, can you tell us a little bit what's happening when you hear an announcement, 100 million seed round?
But it depends. In venture capital, it's difficult to look at trends. In 2024, 40% of investments in VC went to AI. What do you think is the second largest sector after AI?
I would think healthcare, maybe?
No.
No?
The years before, maybe, but in 2024, what do you think it was? Think what was happening in the world.
Maybe
The Ukraine war. It was military
arms.
tech. Military tech was about 20% of VC, because Ukraine war proved that all the military have to change completely. And remember, there was also the war before Ukraine that happened between Azerbaijan and Armenia.
Yes.
Okay, the Azerbaijanis got Turkish drones and destroyed the Armenian tanks in the first 3 hours of the battle in Nagorno-Karabakh. So today, also warfare is changing completely.
Yes.
And these are the two largest sectors right now in the US that are receiving money.
Wow.
Yeah, it's so. Now going back, you posed the question about DeepSeek.
Yes.
Okay. Now, today you can build an LLM, and remember these are LLMs, right? It's a very narrow part of AI. These are the AIs that talk to people. Because you have AIs that don't talk to anything. You give them data, they do experiments and they do things. And there's no the interface is just data, right? But LLM's idea is to try to humanize, right? So it's a special category. The most public, because this is what the public sees, right?
Yes.
Okay. So today there's enough open source code for you to build an AI. Okay? The question is, your code might not be the most efficient. So when you train it, it will cost you more time, more money, right? Okay? Now, DeepSeek is a Chinese AI, and I didn't know about it, by the way, before the announcement.
I think nobody did.
No, and some people said they knew, and I didn't. Personally, I didn't know. Now, what's interesting is the founder has a hedge fund also.
Yeah, quant hedge fund actually.
Yeah. So the question begs the question: we're going to see if the SEC is going to react. Did he short the AI companies before he announced DeepSeek?
Okay.
I have no idea. Okay, no, but I mean, this is a hedge fund, and he comes out with without disclosure. Weird. Okay, now they said that it cost them $5.6 million to build it. It's not true. Okay, this is a bit of it's part of the story to bring down the stocks. Okay. Also, in China, this is my analysis, and I don't have deep views in China. They probably were able to train it on the Chinese people, the data in China, without paying for anything. If they're close to the Chinese government, and the Chinese government wants AI champion, The data is available. This is not a Western society where if I use your data, Dimitri, I have to go get consent.
There is now rumors even that Jack Ma is back.
Yes.
He's also building AI.
Alibaba, a week later, Alibaba announced that they already have an AI. It's called Quinn or something.
Yep.
Okay, so I'm not very surprised about what happened. However, the reaction in the market was a bit silly. Now, does it cost more to build an AI in the US? Yes. Does it cost more when they started and there was nothing else, right? Between DeepMind and OpenAI, right? Yes, it costs. Now it's easier. You have an open source, okay? And now you can use a new AI the old AI to train the new AI also. I mean, DeepSeek, it's not clear if they actually trained their AI on the consumer version of ChatGPT. I have no idea.
Yeah.
But it was interesting. It was sexy. We'll see. But it was way overblown. Okay. In my humble opinion, without knowing a lot of, I don't have a deep view on what's happening in China.
Yes.
This is just an observation from the outside.
Yes. Rabih, do you use AI tools in your day-to-day life?
All the time, yes.
And which ones do you use? And maybe if you can...
So at work, we try to use 3, basically. Gemini Pro, ChatGPT, and Claude. Okay, we like Claude a lot also. Okay, now, each one of them is a bit better at something, and we try to get a view from all. However, these AI tools still hallucinate a bit. At the end of the day, the final product is the responsibility of a person, not the AI.
Yes.
Okay? The last thing I want is we make a mistake and one of my junior colleagues tell me it's the fault of the AI. No, it's our fault, right? So we have to be careful. Now, for me, AI is just today, again, LLMs, the narrow, is a much better version of search.
Yes.
Okay? Gemini Pro has a new version called Deep Search, I think. And what it does is, you pose a question, Dimitri. It lists you all the references it's going to use. And then you can remove certain references or tell it about certain references. And then it does the analysis. So at least you know where the data is coming. And at least you can say, let's say it's a reference by, a country who's trying to manipulate things, or so you can remove it from the basis of the analysis.
In academia, we used to say garbage in, garbage out.
Okay.
It's the same.
And you saw now AI has been the biggest tool to show plagiarism in academia.
Yes.
Right?
It will be a very, very big problem now.
Yes.
For the academia.
I know.
And to do original research as well. Because
So-
what is original research nowadays?
Look, our life is going to change completely. Okay, let me tell you what I believe is going to be the key piece that governments are going to focus on. In India, there are around maybe 100 to 120 million engineers. Okay, now not all of them are IIT graduates, right? In India, you have all sorts of engineers, right? If you take the bottom part, let's say 30 million. These are the guys who work for BPOs, right? The businesses when they were outsourcing stuff, etc. That business is gone. It's gone. You don't need people anymore in that side of business. If that business is shut down, that means you have 30 million engineers in India without jobs.
Okay.
Each one probably supports a family of 5 or 6. This is the problem. This is the problem that we have to address. It's the AI in certain segments is going to create huge unemployment. And that's why some governments have started to talk about a very old, not very old, but a theme they were talking about, something called the universal basic income. You've heard that, right?
Yes.
So basically, in a modern society, certain people should get from the government, from, a certain minimum income, whether they work or they don't work. Because AI is going to be very, very disruptive.
I also believe the same, and I believe that a lot of these people should work for the government. The government should open positions because
but do you want bigger government?
I think there is no way around this.
Government has roles, and I agree with you.
I thought about this a lot, and I believe that for all of these people to actually do something, the government should open more departments and do more stuff.
But governments tend to be inefficient.
It has to change, and we've seen now. We will see actually Elon Musk what he will do with his Doge
department
in the US.
Yeah, but again, my concern is this disruption in society, and we can talk about disruption in a lot of professions. So, for example, medicine, diagnostics.
Yes.
Okay, today my expectations of the accuracy of a doctor are much higher. I don't want to see a doctor at 5 p.m. when he's tired and he makes mistakes. Doctors today don't have an excuse to make systematic mistakes anymore. For example, he gives you a medicine and you're allergic to it.
But which hospital has the best technology?
No, but
this should be your choice.
Yes, exactly.
Exactly. If you have any disease, something that can go very wrong, and you want to do your test, your CT scan or your MRI, if you have a choice to go to the hospital that has the best technology, you will go there. You will not even see who is the doctor.
Exactly. But I want to remove, the nice thing about AI, it can remove systematic errors.
Yes.
Okay? And it's a great opportunity. It can remove systematic errors in contracts.
Yes.
Okay? So the legal industry is going to change. The medical industry is going to change. And we'll see about education. Education has been, we've been investing in online education for the last 20 years. It has not worked very well. You still need teachers, you still need. So we'll see.
Someone 5 years ago told me that AI cannot be creative. And I said, wait and you will see. And nowadays, even the designers.
But how do you define creative?
Let me tell you. Now, even the designers,
are using it.
Before they are creating a banner, the first ideas they will generate is just information to the LLM.
To get inspired. Yes, exactly. Again, I hear this, and it should not be an ego play. Okay? AI today is not a threat. It's a tool that everybody should use. There is no, you're not brave if you say, I'm not using AI. Right? It's not the right analysis. Yes. Because everybody else people who are saying are not using AI are using AI.
Also, I think was very interesting to cover so many different topics about venture capital. Your first investments into the crypto industry, about Rain, about AI. But I think also for the audience, maybe that will be interesting for them to hear. What are your next steps? Where they can meet you? Are there any big events you are attending? What are the big plans you have in your mind for?
So today we're focusing on, we're investing out of our fourth fund, Middle East Venture Fund 4. It's a fund that has a target of $150 million. We've raised around $105 million. So we're still raising the fund, but we're also investing because we invest slowly. So we invest and raise at the same time. So our focus probably until the mid-year is to finish raising the fund. We've already done in this current fund about 12 investments. So we're way under, we've done a lot of deployment. We've deployed already $30 million, okay? And it's just the journey of the fund. I don't spend a lot of time on the investment side. I see the investments when they get to the investment committee. So I'm on the investment committee, and then I help the bigger companies grow and hopefully exit. Typically, we hold companies between 3 and 7 years for exit, so it's a long journey. Okay, I'm focusing today on fundraising for our fourth fund. Obviously, we market for deals. If I see a good deal, I make an intro, and the team handles it. And focusing on the exits of our third fund. That's a fund that is ready for exits, and we have a lot of work to do there.
Is this fund also in the divesting, towards the end of the divesting time period, the third one?
The third fund, yes.
Okay.
Yeah. And the fourth fund, we launched it last year, so it's still early times.
Are there any conferences or events where people can meet you in the coming days or weeks or months?
Yes. I mean, not just me, my partners, our team, we're very visible. The team is at LEAP, the big event in Saudi Arabia. We're going to be at STEP. I will attend. There is a monetary agency in Saudi Arabia, has an annual event around IPOs. We always attend. Today, the most dynamic IPO market from a technology perspective is Saudi Arabia. They have the most technology companies that are listed. Now, the UAE has been very, very, aggressive also, but not a lot of technology. And then we had the very nice IPO of Talabat. Yes. Which, by the way,
Rabih, was that the biggest one last year?
It was the biggest in the world.
Wow.
And it listed on the DFM. Nice. But by number of listings, in technology, Saudi Arabia is ahead. Okay, and Talabat is nice because it's Talabat. The story started in Kuwait. the company was.
Can you tell us a bit more? I wish was not
Sure,
aware
sure.
of that.
So, have you been to Kuwait?
Yes.
Okay. Kuwait is one of the most.
I'm actually the vice president of the Cyprus Kuwait Association.
Okay. I was born in Kuwait, so I know Kuwait. I love Kuwait. You know,
Well,
great,
I also really like
great
Kuwait.
people, great. You know, so the Kuwaitis are very sophisticated, and some of the first delivery businesses were actually created in Kuwait, and Talabat was created as a food delivery business in Kuwait by Mr. Lughani, who is the founder of Flowered. And then he sold to a Kuwaiti VC fund called Faith Capital. And then Faith Capital sold to Delivery Hero. And then Delivery Hero also acquired another Kuwaiti company called Caravan or Carriage, put them together and then grew it in the region, except in Saudi Arabia. Because Delivery Hero also had another food delivery business in Saudi Arabia called Hunger Station. So Talabat is big in most of the Arab world except Saudi. And Hunger Station is the largest only in Saudi, and they're both owned by Delivery Hero. That's a public company listed in Germany. And Delivery Hero is an investor with us in our fund, so we know them very well. So they grew Talabat. Talabat is a very successful business, profitable business. When they listed, Anton, they did not increase capital. They sold secondary shares because Hami did not need money. So by law in the UAE, when you list, you have to dilute at least 20%. And dilution can be primary shares, new capital, or secondary shares. So Delivery Hero actually sold 20% and received $2 billion.
Wow.
It's an amazing transaction. And also a great company that grew, Corona helped it when people started delivering, and they executed very, very well. Talabat is a very, very strong management team that executes very, very well.
Have a very good UI UX.
Yes. Yeah.
Yes. And maybe one of the last questions from me. What do you think about the capital markets in the UAE? You mentioned that there's a lot of listings last year. I think some of them, I can just say, I also participate a little bit to try out
Yes.
I mean,
what's the name of the crypto?
Phoenix. I think you're talking about Phoenix,
Okay,
actually. Yeah.
Phoenix Technology.
Phoenix, very strong.
Yeah, amazing.
Our
right?
very good
amazing
friends.
company in Abu
Yes.
Dhabi, right?
Yes.
So in the UAE, what happened was they listed companies that are basically supported by the government. Okay, ADNOC Drilling, I think, listed. They listed Salik,
Yes,
right?
exactly.
DIWA listed something, right? So these were mostly government-supported companies, which is good because at the end of the day, even in the UAE, in Kuwait, and in Saudi Arabia, investors, retail investors like yield. They like companies that are profitable, that pay them dividends. Okay, this is what investors like. Now, we're trying to change that because typically technology companies will not pay dividends because they need the money to grow, and they will pay you capital appreciation. But we need to educate the investors, and you only educate investors by giving them good investment experiences. They have to make money.
Yes.
Okay. Today we're not at that stage yet. All the technology companies that were listed in the Middle East have been profitable companies. In the US, typically you can list a company to raise money. It can be losing money, right?
Yeah.
How
But
many?
growing.
I cannot remember how many case studies are there for Amazon,
Yes,
Yes.
yes.
and still Amazon has done superb.
But look, what saved Amazon?
So,
Jeff Bezos first is a visionary operational genius. He wanted to reduce his costs, and he decided to start doing his own
Cloud.
cloud. And then when it grew, he said, I can do it on a third-party basis.
yes.
And this is what saved Amazon. You know,
Yes.
the other stuff, the e-commerce is very important, but if there was no AWS, it would not have been as big or as successful. So crypto assets are here to stay. I think DeFi is very, very important. And this is a conversation that we need to have with the regulators. The biggest threat today for crypto is excessive regulation, in my opinion. Okay. Now there has to be some regulation because you get charlatans, Dimitri, who sell really bad stuff. There was some news, and I didn't read it, but there was some crypto scandal in Kuwait recently. I read something where somebody did something, and so we need some regulation, but we don't need to over-regulate. Okay, this is very important. The other thing, there's a very unique opportunity in the region because we have abundant energy. That is important also for crypto, okay? In addition, I think as we mature as economies, we need to be less linked to the US dollar. Okay, Kuwait depegged a bit 10 years ago, and now they use a basket of currencies, the pound and the euro, not just the US dollars, but at some point we need to sort of carry our own destiny. When you're back to the dollars, which is very important for stability, but you know, from a monetary perspective, the Fed in the US is deciding, right? You know, about, you know, interest rates, etc., and you follow. And I think we need to be able to do that. And this is one of the opportunities of, you know, DeFi and crypto, okay? Also, and I don't know if I was a bit too pessimistic, but the future of VC is very good. We're going to see more listings. Now, the Arab world is a bit complex. It's more than 30 countries, different currencies, different regulations. We have multiple markets to list in. This is one of the complexities, right? So a UAE company today cannot list directly in Saudi Arabia because the law in Saudi says the top co has to be a Saudi top co. Now, the regulators understand the issue and they're going to change the regulation, okay?
I think I said it in a previous podcast or somewhere. I cannot remember where, but when all the GCC countries will reunite, like really true reunite, you will see amazing things here.
Look, I think it will happen. I think
I also believe it will happen.
I think today there probably was a different level of development between certain countries and others. The less developed countries are catching up. Once they catch up, I think we're going to go back to something that's a bit more tight. You know, so the future is positive. We are very lucky to be in this part of the region, and crypto is the future. And you know, I'm in VC, so I have to be positive, right? The glass is always half full, not half empty, or else we'll not invest in anything. If I don't believe in a good future, how would you invest in anything in VC, right? Because we're investing in the future of these companies. So you know, we have to be positive. You can only be positive if you're in VC, or else you have to do distressed debt, maybe. I don't know.
Fire sales.
You know, exactly. Yes. So thank you for having me. This is a great conversation, and we're very, very happy to be in the region.
Yes. Demetrios, I think this was one of we always top the podcasts, and Rabih, really thank you very much. It was an amazing pleasure, and also for me, a unique experience in our podcast because we have you as an expert coming from venture space, which is very, very different in understanding the industries, understanding the trends. The founders, many times, which we usually host, understand those, but from their very specific perspective. I would really like to thank you. And also, when the time comes to redo this again and have you again for a follow-up, it would be a big pleasure. And really thank you very much for having me, for having us. Yeah, Demetrios, if you want to add something.
I will say, like, I'm not sure if you were teaching us or you were mentoring us, but you did really, really amazing. I'm sure our audience will love this kind of conversations. And if I was going back in the past to start my own company, this was definitely going to be a podcast that I will be watching, because so many insights that you cannot, even if you Google them in the internet or search them, you cannot find them. So thank you very much for being here, and thank you, Anton, for being a great host.
Always. Thank you very much.
Thank you.